thank you so much for joining us. It's I'm humbled to have you with us. I obviously know a bit of your background, but for the people that are joining us, can you give us a bit of an overview of where you've come from, what you've done?
Sure. Well, I'm humbled to be here as well, Peter, and thanks everybody. So, I am born in Jersey City, New Jersey. My parents were divorced when I was one, and my mom pushed a hot dog cart in Jersey City, being the daughter of a blind man, my grandfather that I would call Pop. When I was 5 years old, my mom had a couple of burning questions in her heart and mind in 1975. First, she was thinking, how is my son going to make a living? Second, how would he ever support or even potentially have a family, as she found out that I was going to go blind at the age of 5. Fast forward throughout my early life as an athlete, so it was a degenerative condition over time, and through my law school career, I figured out a couple of things. First, I was very present to the reality that folks produce outcomes at very different accelerations and rates that didn't seem to me to be particularly dependent upon talent. Behind me, which I'll move with my board, is that jersey with the 80 on it, which I think is one of the most iconic stories in history. It's signed by all the players from what I perceive to be, number one, the greatest sports upset in history, and number two, the greatest example of human potential and the variance of results that people produce based upon what's possible. So first, the 1980 US Miracle on Ice team, that's the jersey, beat the Soviet team of professional athletes. These are a bunch of amateur kids that beat the greatest professional team in the history of the world. And that, my career and seeing what occurred in law school with really smart people working really, really hard and not getting the grades they wanted or the outcomes they wanted from a massive investment, all that in sum, Peter, through my childhood and early years and early 20s, left me with the absolute conclusion that the world does not work the way we think it does, and that people are really blind, as I was going blind, to the reality of how it all works. And that is where I concluded what I would call my childhood at the ripe young age of 26 as I graduated from law school and then entered the next stage of life. So that's where I entered the next stage of life, thinking at the very least I had it figured out, but alas, I did not.
So what's the next phase then?
Yeah, so the next phase is, I thought it was about working really hard and producing phenomenal outcomes and results. And I very quickly came to realize that that was only marginally true. Like, working hard was required, at least through certain stages of achieving the life that we truly desired in our heart. And by the way, I define success not in monetary terms. I define success in terms of having the life that you desire, the people, the emotional experiences, the realities of life, and whatever freedoms and abundances that you would like to have. And that could include financial, but it doesn't have to. So I rapidly, though, realized that in a capitalist structure, a lot of people want to create some level of financial freedom, and that was very connected to our mindset and our emotions. And so I decided that I was going to figure this all out, because I saw people in great pain who wanted a greater mindset, a greater freedom, and they weren't experiencing it. So I set out on this mission of focusing on mindset and acceleration and breakthroughs in life, because my reality was that when it was all done, I wanted to make sure it wasn't that I would have no regrets. We all want to do a lot of things differently. Was that I would have lived an incredibly intentional life once I became clear about intention. And that intention to me was to mirror the people who I love the most in the world, who didn't have any degree of financial success at all, my grandparents and other beautiful, incredible people in my family. And they had this remarkable sense of love, connection, and experience of magic with their entire family. And my final point on this, Peter, is when my grandmother died 2 years ago, I had the privilege of being with her when she knew it was literally going to be her last moments. She was on the verge of having a massive stroke. Her heart rate was up massively. I had lived with my grandparents at a young age. And this is like not for dramatic purposes. This is all factually correct. Nani, I held her hand She looked at me, told me everything I meant to her. I told her everything she meant to me. And while she wasn't ready to go, she had such a zest for life and wanted to spend more time with her family. She was clear that in the time she was given, she had lived the life that she wanted of family and love. And so, yeah, that's sort of where I am today. Studying how all this occurs for people has been the work of my life. And that's where we are.
It's a beautiful story. I think a lot of people could learn from living a life of intent and making, you don't know how many days you're going to have, but making sure the days you have are the ones that you want to have, right?
Yes,
So and this is where obviously you and I met. So you spent your life, you said, trying to figure that out. And I think that it's maybe fair to say that has now become embodied in Unblinded and the formula. Something that I think is an incredible access point for anybody, but I'm not going to do it justice if I introduce it. So what is the formula? What is Unblinded, the 1 minute, 2 minute version?
Yeah, sure. So Unblinded is, one, the awakening to the reality that life doesn't work the way we're conditioned to think that it does. And two, that there is actually a formula to create the results and outcomes that we desire. Footnote, that formula isn't work hard and be a good person. Like, yeah, that's a part of it, but that's like saying that we're going to be able to build a city because we manifest it in our brain. Like, it takes a lot to make those things occur. And when I began to see the people in the space of personal development being unbelievably well-intentioned and incredibly moved, but then becoming jaded, cynical, unhappy, and even blaming the people teaching beautiful messages. For me, and this was early in my acceleration and development and learning about life and business, and in my late 20s, I became really committed to the reality that personal development is just what we are from birth, right? We learn to walk, we learn to ride a bicycle, we learn to read, speak, learn people and emotions. And it's just this evolutionary dynamic that never stops. And that I think folks have mistaken a self-help section of the bookstore or a seminar for personal development, or a person as representative of personal development, when I think we all are personally developing endlessly. It's the question of in what direction, how, and the formula is designed to give people the potential for intentionality. Footnote 2, I do not profess to be perfect in the formula. I don't profess to have created a formula. I claim to have undiscovered what just exists, in the same way that math and numbers would exist. It's an explanation for why people produce, and nobody produces all the results they want all the time. It's a formula to analyze and dissect why people produce the results they want when they do, and why they don't when they do not. And so that's what the formula is.
Okay, so we're saying, when you say you haven't discovered it, was always that we're talking like, you know, this is a great comparison for you. We're talking about Newton and gravity. It was always there. It just needed a name for us to understand it and get to grips with it.
Yeah. Can I illustrate something for fun for like 30 seconds?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So Bruce Springsteen, right? He has been rated in Rolling Stone, and of course those surveys change at times. But on more than one occasion, Bruce Springsteen has been rated the #1 live act in the history of rock music. So if you're to dissect Bruce Springsteen's pure voice quality, and I love Bruce Springsteen, by the way, and if you were to dissect his pure voice quality according to a voice coach, you would find that there is great suboptimal dynamics there. Yep. So the question is, why is he so beloved and what's occurring? And the answer is this in the formula. He has an incredible ability to create rapport with his audience. He understands their pain points and their default in those and how to interrupt those and access their yes strategies. His heroic, unique identity has been created in such a way that it embodies all of the characteristics that a hero would: humility, awareness, empathy, love, perseverance, fire, and many more. Fourth, he has the incredible ability to powerfully ask questions and form agreements with his audience, the basic 4 steps. In addition, he has a remarkable variance of his four energies of fun energy, aspirational energy, goddess, and Zeus. They are always and constantly varied throughout all of his shows, as are his songs, from absolute fire to deep reflection and introspection continuously, and all 10 of the indispensable elements. For the sake of time, I won't analyze him through those, but I could in 3 minutes. That is why Bruce Springsteen, on an influence mastery level, is incredible. But with all of that, he was still a nobody in a New Jersey bar for 10 years in the New Jersey bar scene. The acceleration came because he understood process mastery. He understood the idea that depending upon where and who you connect with and use and show those remarkable powers and abilities, acceleration is therefore created. So he became not only a genius at going from hello to yes with an audience, hearing him play, but he understood what he needed to do in the business of music so that his music would be heard by the world. Neither of those two levels of mastery would have mattered for anything if he didn't have the third piece. He had self-mastery at a remarkable level. Maybe people do, maybe they don't understand this, but contrary to most rock stars, Bruce Springsteen was never a heavy partier. After concerts and shows, he would go back and he would reflect on his shows, he would analyze things with the band, and if you read his book, Born to Run, and look at chapter 74, where he talks about after the death of Clarence Clemens, and he was analyzing Clarence's nephew Jake taking over, he talks about the self-mastery differential between him and his beloved friend Clarence, and the disruptions that he had to create for Jake to step into the E Street Band and not take Clarence's spot, but at least partially consume that space on stage, and the gaps in self-mastery that Jake had to learn that Bruce had mastered that made him, despite perhaps some God-given inferior talents and abilities in his voice, to become one of the most iconic rock stars in history. That's the formula in a nutshell.
And that's an amazing access point for everybody. I mean, I'm from the UK, so Bruce Springsteen isn't as big here. He's certainly big, but I can liken that to U2.
Amen.
Bono does not have actually a great voice, but U2 is U2. I mean, you can't debate them. You can't debate Springsteen. And if you look through sports stars as well, whatever access point you need to map what Sean just said, you'll find somebody in your field where you go, wow, okay, why is that guy actually that successful and popular? And it's because, as you said, of finding those points of process, influence, and self-mastery, and dialing into those gives you that. And this is something you've actually just raised, something I think is really crucial, and it's kind of perversely linked back to our current situation with COVID-19. One of the things I think people don't get that I'd love for you to expand on is the power of exponential and compounding. It's so important. That's why I said, why the virus at the moment, because it's the kind of embodiment of what happens with exponential and compounding. Yeah. So, if you could expand this, because I love the 99.99, the way that you explain that and how, Yeah,
Peter, thank you. So, okay, I am certainly not a math genius at the high levels, but I am incredibly skilled thanks to Sister Rosemary in 5th grade of my Catholic grammar school, Peter, and her insane militance about the times tables. And so, and also my love for baseball and baseball cards and looking at numbers on the back. So I think we are in great shape with our understanding of mathematics if we understand addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponents. And if that's all we have is understanding that 2 to the 4th power, or better yet, like 5 to the 4th power, is a remarkably different thing than 5 times 4. And so exponentiality begins with the understanding that things are not in a straight line. That's not how things expand. Well, some things expand that way, but other things like this horrific disease, but also on the other hand, your money left in the stock market for many years, expand geometrically. What I mean by geometric expansion is things multiply on top of themselves. So let's say it's a following for Bruce Springsteen or for Bono and U2, which, by the way, if you go into YouTube, you will see an amazing number of duets between Bruce and Bono. They're friendly, and they've performed a number of times together, and it's incredible. As a third footnote. Yeah. So let's say that Bruce Springsteen is playing in a New Jersey bar, and he, in the early days, plays in front of 100 people, and 90 of those people are half distracted, and they're having a beer, and they're trying to meet a man or a woman or hang out with their friends, and 10 are like, this guy's incredible, like he's incredible, and those 10 are super committed to telling their friends, and out of those 10, right, out of those 10, 5 of them are good at influencing or great at influencing their friends. So 5 people tell their friends, nothing happens. 5 people tell their friends, and 4 of those people have one friend come next time, and one of them, which is a true connector influencer, has 10 friends that come, and everybody else comes back. So now all of a sudden, the next time that Bruce Springsteen plays, he has 10, the original 10, plus the one that brought 10, now we're up to 20, plus the 4 that each brought a friend, now we're up to 24 people. You go, okay, well, that's not that exciting, but let's do it again. And let's say the next grouping, right? In the next grouping, we have 2 people like the original person. That number becomes not 48, that number becomes somewhere more around 60. And that's in 2 shows. That's how you end up with 80,000 people at a Bruce Springsteen concert only a decade after he was sitting in a place like that, but not in one location like he was, locations from all over the world. 30 more seconds, Peter. That's the beginning picture of exponentiality. Now, the ability for people to harness that potential is like this. As we leverage things, we leverage the energy of ourselves and of others by giving something to them. Like, I'm here not getting a single thing monetarily from Bruce Springsteen, but he has added such extraordinary value to my life that I'm using him, and often do, not all the time, but semi-often, use him as an example when I speak to lots of fine folks. There's a great possibility that at least 1 or 2 or 3 people that may not have otherwise liked Bruce Springsteen when we're done today will end up looking up Bruce, potentially becoming a fan, maybe going to a concert or purchasing something. And I am one of a million like me running around the face of the earth doing that today when Bruce Springsteen potentially is taking a nap right now. So exponentiality means understanding the numerical growth, number 1, that can just occur, and number 2, that the way we can cause it, similar to Tony Robbins or Oprah, is by adding value in a leverage dynamic like you're doing right here, Peter. And over time, if the value is there in influence, if the process mastery is there, people being connected, and everybody's self-mastery maintains enough, this creates massive acceleration forward. If we don't love numbers at least enough to understand multiplication, addition and subtraction, and exponents, we will forever, to me, be missing our human potential, whether that be in monetary terms, but more importantly, spiritual and impact terms. So that's my quick snippet on exponentiality. How does that land for you?
Absolutely. I mean, my 2 cents on it would be, in my career, my historical career has been helping people with underperforming digital assets like websites. And I went through this exercise with someone the other day, and it was, if you have 10,000 people see your ad on Facebook and 10% of them join your email, 10% of them go to the landing page, and 10% of them go sign up, you end up with 10 signups. If you change the 10,000 people to 11,000, and then all you do is shift the 10% that go through each step to 11%. So not to 20 or 30, you just change 10% to 11%. The difference at the other end is a 68% difference. When you just move 1, 1, 1, and 1,
wow,
the difference is 68%. And for me, the reason that's so important is people, when they're trying to solve problems, are so focused on tearing the house down and rebuilding it, and it's like, no, stop. What do we need? Tweak. If we've got the right model, if we truly believe in our gut that we're being authentic and we have integrity and we're in congruence with our belief system, tweak. Just do the little tweaks, because these tweaks are going to add up in a way that you can mathematically understand it, but conceptually it's almost unbelievable when you see it. You're like, whoa. And it's the other side to me would also say it's the old, parable of the girl looking after elephants in India. When asked what she wanted for payment, she said, I want 1 grain of rice on the first chess square, and I want you to double it for every grain of rice on the chess square. And the prince said, sure, no problem at all, thinking she was going to ask for carpets and rugs and gold. And by the time you get, I think it's only halfway through the chessboard, just by doubling every time, you end up with more rice than the world could ever produce if it just turned the entire world into rice. I mean, it's ridiculous numbers. Just by doubling, 2 to the power of 32, you get to this crazy number.
Could I jump in and share? Thank you. That's brilliant. I love those two contexts for explaining exponentiality. And I think also people understanding that what destroys the power of our acceleration and our expansion, what destroys it is exactly what you said, are those microscopic leaks, these breakdowns that occur at each step or stage or part or piece. And those leaks become what results in people lying to themselves and going, none of this actually works. And that's exactly, to come full circle, what I was creating in the formula. So people can find those leaks in everything that they're doing and become connected to the idea of exponentiality, mentally and emotionally, and that the idea of these leaks and holes, and what are they? And they're process mastery, influence mastery, self-mastery. So thank you for that, because I wouldn't have completed that circle without your access. So thank you.
So linking this back to then mindset and motivation, Jessica just said, how does them, because I think it's quite relevant, how do we help people not stick their head in their sand and take action? Have you ever felt fear? And I'm sure you have, because we're all human, and wanting to escape or shut down. How did you shift that and get from fear to action?
Yeah. So I have like 50 hours to say about that. Yeah. So I will give the most concise minute or two, and then keep expanding it as you see fit, Peter. So I feel fear every day. When I first started creating my own acceleration, I wanted to quit. I've wanted to quit some of the most meaningful things I'm doing in my life. I wanted to quit every single thing that I've ever meaningfully done in my life, at the beginning and the middle and right before the end. And in some of them, I wanted to quit every single day for months, if not years, at least 3 to 5 times every day. So that is my answer to, have I ever felt fear? Yes. Not only do I feel fear, I feel like quitting all the time. This morning, when I woke up and saw what my schedule was for today, which, by the way, is very much moving towards a substantial part of my dream for this stage of my life. And I looked at it, I didn't feel good. And I'm like, oh, I think I might be getting sick. I think I need more rest. How am I going to do all this? Is this thing over here really going to work? Is this a waste of time? Is this working? All of these things were the things I was thinking within minutes of opening my eyes today. So how do you go from that space of fear, overwhelm, frustration, desire not to do, feeling loss of freedom in pockets of your life at time, all of these things that we make up? Well, first, it's to realize it's all just made up. Everything that we are feeling is connected, like thoughts influence feelings, feelings influence thoughts. So once I was awakened to this reality clearly, about the age of 27, and I graduated from the delusion that there was something about motivation and inspiration that was really driving us. And I had enough times where I listened to a great song that motivated me, and then 15 minutes later didn't get the outcome I wanted and just quit and stopped, to be stupid and silly enough to think that motivation works and inspiration works as something you can fuel and drive yourself forward on consistently. It was at the stage when I began to realize that we are, my initial access for all of this was the work of Tony Robbins, so I always acknowledge him, and Awaken the Giant Within, was to realize that we are controlled by pain. And so much more than pleasure. And that was a remarkable breakthrough for me. And I became committed to mastering that concept in every way I could think of applying it to my nervous system and mentality. And I came to the conclusion that I think I'm relatively weak in a lot of ways mentally, because I don't like pain very much. So I just harnessed how I apply pain to myself and reverse the entire process. So I now know in that moment when I'm thinking those things, that the pain of being on my final day on earth, or the pain of looking at all the people I love and saying, nope, I quit, or I don't feel like it, I'm not getting this done. When I connect in a very present way to that pain, that immediately creates the beginnings of a shift, right? So I've conditioned my mindset, my nervous system, to link massive amounts of pain to the behaviors that I know are not going to deliver the outcomes that resonate at the highest levels of my why, my legacy, my heart, my soul. And then from there, I've also realized the insane power of how we use our body. And I mean the insane power of how we use our physical body. And I talk continuously. You hear people saying, get out of your head. What I believe that actually means is to be in your body. And so I turn my body on. I engage every muscle in my body regularly and consistently. And I do it throughout the day in different dynamics and my voice. And I realize that those things physiologically create impacts inside of me. So it's how we use our mindset to deal with pain, how we use our physical body. Those are two enormous initial access points. And of course, I have plenty of more complex things to share, but those would be the beginning stages.
I challenge something you said and see if you agree with it.
Yeah.
So you said pain is far more powerful than pleasure, and I agree, but I want to see if a kind of a reframing, if you agree more with the way I see it. And what I say to people is pain is in the most insanely powerful force to initiate change. But pleasure is the force that continues and embeds that change.
Amen. Yeah. If I didn't add that, Peter, we don't have to. 1,000% I agree. So I gave you the access point for how I shift myself in the moment.
Yeah.
And then I absolutely unquestionably fill myself with dopamine. I'm a drug addict. I'm a drug addict, and I've never smoked pot or taken any narcotic. The drugs I'm addicted to are endorphins and dopamine. And I have addicted myself to having dopamine release and oxytocin for connecting with human beings, for achieving outcomes. I could literally feel those chemicals entering my body. And I also have calibrated my functioning to realize the balance of those coming from different sources. Otherwise, we will have other cortisol, which I don't like cortisol coming into our system and screwing it all up. So yeah, I believe pleasure is what endures. That's what produces the dopamines, the oxytocins, those things. But to get ourselves accelerated into action, to me, that leverages often pain. Not always though, Peter, because it depends. The deeper I am in exhaustion, in overwhelm, and some cortisol hitting me, the more I'm gonna have to connect to pain to accelerate. The less I do if cortisol has found its way into my system.
Yep, totally. The analogy I used to tell people was, if you're driving a car down a road and your wheel tire pressure is fine, your oil pressure is fine, you've got a full tank of gas, would you pull over and check the car? And the answer is, well, no. Why would you do that? Whereas if I say, right now you've got a light going off, an oil pressure, would you pull over? Well, maybe. But what if your tire wheel fell off and rolled in front of you? Would you then pull over? Well, yeah. and then you would do what? Well, you'd either call somebody for help or you change it yourself. Whatever you do, this is my analogy of if the car's going fine, there's no reason to change. If the car isn't going fine, so likening this back to your own mindset for everybody that's listening to this, if something's not going the way you want it, pull over and change. Whether that's a self exercise, whether that's a group exercise, whether that's something like this, whether that's unblinded, wherever the right thing is for you, don't stay in that space, change it.
Yeah. And I'll say this, Peter, I agree with that 1,000%. And I also agree, I was up, at about 6:15 this morning. I had the beginning of meetings and presentations starting at 7 a.m. And I had a narrow window, not that, a 1 hour window where I was going to get ready and start my day, right? And in that window, I don't give myself a choice. So you could say, I have choice. I could take it because I felt a little bit tired. I went out and it's cold. I'm in northern New Jersey today. I'm not at the beach house. I'm in my primary residence. And I ran intervals, hills outside, hard, right? Like minute hard on, 30 seconds off, 12 hard intervals, and engaged my body in an extraordinary way. And there was no part of me that wanted to do that. So I also deprived myself of choice. Like, okay, this is just what this window is. And again, the pain is there saying I quit. I didn't do what I would, my process is. But then I know the pleasure is going to be there when I'm done. I feel amazing and I'm ready for the day. And so it's connecting to that reality of life lying to us all the time and structuring things. So we take that car in for its innovations and updates. And I would say beyond, like, I don't look at any of these things as maintenance. I look at them as action, innovation, and the innovation is the check-in for the car where it's like, oh, wow, there's like new tires. Oh my goodness, like there's this other thing that can make my car 10 times more fuel efficient. Now I don't even know if those things exist, but those things certainly exist when we are, my friend, as you're saying, hacking mankind. Like the hacks exist for what's happening here. And that's why I'm loving what you're up to and doing here.
Thank you. And yeah, linking into some of the content, and it's worth me dropping in here. For anybody that's listening to this on Zoom or via the Facebook Live that's working, www.hackmankind.com. We have opened it up free for the first 1,000 people. We might even continue it beyond there because we want to help people live in hope and opportunity and abundance and get rid of fear and scarcity. Because if you've listened to any of our other Q&As, our health expert, Ed Lay, this is not belief, this is scientific fact. Fear leads to stress, and stress leads to a reduced immune system. And one of the things that isn't being talked about enough, social distancing, yes, understand, but actually social distancing, believe it, is not about keeping you safe, it's about making sure you don't affect other people. The way to keep yourself safe, or the way to help with that process, is to be hydrated, to sleep well, to live in congruence with your values, and to have nutrition. So your immune system, should you get sick, is at its optimal state to cope with that sickness. And it's something that we go through. So coming back to mindset and motivation, then, I have a question for you that I haven't approached you for at all. And I hope I've already said, Sean, how grateful I am that you've made this time, because I do know how busy your schedule is. And I'm truly honored. When we had mindset and motivation on the list, people were like, who are you going to talk to? And like, we had other people offer to come and do it. I'm like, no, I know who I want to talk to, because I don't want a rah-rah, to use a phrase of yours, I don't want a rah-rah, let's go and watch a 30-second Rocky montage mindset motivation person. And I love it when you say that, because every time you say it, I laugh, because I literally have those moments saved in my YouTube channel to watch for myself every so often, but I wanted something deeper, which is why I wanted to.
And I use those as well, but I understand that, their context. And believe me, brother, as you know, I can rah-rah the house, so I know how to scientifically do that, but I also know that there's a time and a place for that, but there's a time and a place for all of the things we're talking about in a formula for our mindset motivation.
Well, it's the difference between, and this is probably a terrible analogy, but it's the difference between, somebody that likes, putting some cocaine up their nose versus somebody that lives in a life of abundance with their family and friends and relatives.
Yeah.
One pays you back for a lifetime, the other gives you 20 seconds of apparent joy.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. Or perhaps when I eat my Twizzlers and realize a little while later that they probably weren't the best choice in that moment for bringing the ultimate mindset, motivation, and pleasure.
This is where you can tell, ladies and gentlemen, the difference between someone that's done this for several years and the person that started doing this a few weeks ago, because Sean knew to use Twizzlers as the analogy. I went with cocaine. I added the words apparently in, but still, it was still not the best way to go with it. So, what are you seeing, Sean, in the world that you're concerned with? For me, it's fear and misinformation. That's not me priming you, but where are you seeing that you're going, this shouldn't be this way?
Yeah, my goodness. I think what shouldn't be this way is this is all the byproduct of the educational system with beautiful, amazing, wonderful, incredible souls being just so broken. We are not taught how to produce the outcomes we want, going back to the formula. We just work hard, try. I look, I'm paying for my son and I'm blessed. He is brilliant. And we have really in-depth conversations. You've met Tyler, you've been so kind with him.
Phenomenal human being.
Yeah, thank you. And I had this conversation with him. He's like, Dad, why am I going to college? And I'm like, it's a great question. And we sit back and like look at it and scratch my head with the traditional and educational system. Now, there's socialization growth, there's emotional growth. I'm not sure you can get those better somewhere else. So it's a much more complex discussion. But the thing that I am most concerned about is the mindset of people. So thank you for having me on in this slot, because it is the mindset of humanity. People associate me with marketing, sales, and influence. And that is something I have developed an incredible skill set in. And I think it's the most unique way to experience me. So people hear my voice, and uniqueness is important. And I am super grateful and proud of what I've learned and where I stand in the world. Very comfortable that I can teach that at a level that nobody else on earth can match, right? And or at least exceed. And so I really hold that space and I own it in my heart. However, I think mindset is something that lots of people claim it's more crowded, it's more complicated. It's something that it's harder to distinguish yourself and differentiate. But if you're gonna hear from me every bit as much as I understand influence, that's the level at which I would also say I understand the dynamics of mindset and motivation. And so the dynamic of how we think and what we're blinded to is extraordinary for me. And my heart hurts and I ache. I've coached youth sports teams. I didn't take my message, my teachings to the world until the last, really year or so. And all along though, I never stopped coaching, teaching, and leading people. It's how I, grew my businesses as I did, but also how I had some very successful, not only on the field, but in terms of the things that the kids were learning on the team and coaching youth sports, my children's teams and teams before I had children, coaching in youth athletics. And what I would see again, well-intentioned parents and the things they would say to their kids and the lessons that they were conditioning into them. And I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, but a mistake I don't think I've made is understanding what true north, what the higher vibrational dynamic that we're all aspiring to, what that mindset looks like, what that nervous system looks and functions like. And I don't think we have such a fundamental misunderstanding of what any of that looks like, for example. And I'm like, this is part of the mission. I watch shows on television and I watch, regardless of what I believe, for example, politically, okay? I watch shows from the left and the right, and the horrific, shameful things these people are teaching other people that follow them about judgments, about blame, about division. And so if you were to ask me, and you did, in responding, what is the thing I'm most concerned about is how broken our mindset is in America and the world, right? Because people we'll talk about the broken America and da. Listen, the whole world wants to come to America, not wants to come to America, but America is the country that most people in the world want to come to. So there's even like distortion all around, envy and jealousy amongst people and places. It's all mindset and how we are choosing our intentionality around this distinction. The ability to unconditionally love people with boundaries, not codependently, not so people are taking from us, not so people are harming us, unconditionally love people with boundaries versus blame and judgment of others. Like I blame and judge other people reflexively. And Allison Armstrong's got some brilliant, beautiful work in distinguishing between our cave self and our spirit self. And I agree, right, with those dynamics because I could find myself in a space, in a moment of blame and judgment of a person versus distinguishing actions I don't want near and around me that I'll create separation from while still loving people unconditionally with boundaries. So my answer very clearly is mindset, and that's what I mean by mindset. The distinction between loving unconditionally with boundaries versus blame and judgment of humanity. I think that is the fundamental destructive flaw which leads to all sorts of division, problems, issues, and immense fear and distortion that is wildly misplaced.
I couldn't agree more. So, okay, my question for you now is, and we're almost wrapping up, so I'm conscious of everyone's time, but my belief, and it's, or to use a more personal development language mindset, my hallucination, is that I love that phrase. That's one of my favorite phrases from everything I ever learned, actually. But anyway, is that the light bulb has to go off for any of this to happen within an individual. And my belief is that that light bulb turns on. And I'm going to tell you mine, and then ask you is when people realize they have a choice in everything. You have a choice whether you argue with someone. Someone can be screaming in your face, and until you raise your voice in return, or until you are not arguing, at that point, just someone shouting at you. An argument requires two people to choose to argue with each other, otherwise it isn't an argument. Everything is a choice. And as soon as you go, I have a choice as to just ... then you can go, I have a choice as to how I listen to this. I can pull the facts out of Fox versus CNN, and I can leave the narrative to one side. I can choose that I agree with Sean on X and Y, and I don't agree with Sean on Z. I can choose. And it's a word that I think to me, it's the beginning of that light bulb moment of understanding that your mind is something that you control versus controls you, is just that I have a choice. What would you say if you had to start someone on a new trajectory right now? What would be the one thing you wanted to get into them?
I love that choice access. So I'm integrating and contemplating all of its applications as Genesis, start point. And I do love that. So I don't disagree with it. I get 100% agree with it if I give a little bit more thoughts. I'm checking against it, right? But I totally agree that it's immensely relevant. And yeah, that could be the absolute starting point. The phraseology I would have used coming into today is, and I guess it's choice, choosing self-awareness. So to me, it all begins with becoming aware of self, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. And so, and I guess integrating what you're brilliantly sharing, Peter, is choice, that we have choice. And that realization to me is self-awareness over what we think, what we feel, what we do. And that when people struggle to control, to influence, I don't say control, because I experience anger. So I'm a big believer in experiencing feelings. Absolutely. And be human, right? And that's a longer conversation. So but to have an intention around what feelings we'll experience, how long we'll experience them for, what we'll do, and how it serves our ultimate dreams and interests, all of that requires self-awareness to check in. Hey, what do we think? What do we do? What do we feel? And how does all this work? And it was when I became attuned to the concept of self-awareness it gave me the beginning of the access to change everything. I'm like, oh, I'm self-aware of how I communicate. What is communication? It means connecting. It means this, like, and all of a sudden the innovations begin. And to me, they flow from self-awareness. But if I may, and I'll cite you as integrating choice. So self-awareness, I think, yes, perfectly integrates with the concept of choice.
Okay, I think we can take both of those. So my final question before I ask you two quick fire questions and then we're done is I love it when I hear a jarring answer to something that I've said that I think is 2 + 2. And it's when I asked you if you would come on board and graciously do this for me, I said, I'd like you to come on board and help me explain to people and help them understand mindset and motivation. And you said, both or either. And I went, in my head, I went, they're the same word. Now, they're obviously not the same word because otherwise there would only be one word. So what do you see as the difference between those two?
Okay, great. So I think mindset is the process-driven structure of what is. So we have a structural framework, to me, defines our mindset. And I could explain my process of how my mind is set. Like, what is this processing mechanism of the world? I interpreted the word motivation to mean, at its best usage, not the Rocky video, but at its best usage, how within the framework of the mindset we've established, and mindset to me would be the equivalent in my formula of the word phraseology, self-mastery. Like, so in the context of our self-mastery, what is it that we are doing to accelerate our action steps, our zone action steps, our optimal action steps forward? What is it that we're utilizing to create that beautifully effective leverage and movement forward? And that, for me, is how I would distinguish those two words.
So as I heard that, I'm hearing mindset is almost who you are and who you choose to show up as. And motivation is the force that gets that to the place you want it to be.
Yeah, operating within that framework. So I might say, like, mindset is to body, okay, as oxygen is to motivation. Maybe that would be a fair but not perfect analogy, because there's other things that would be equivalent in our body to oxygen. So motivation would be more encompassing than oxygen, but it would, yeah, I would go like that.
Okay, and this, just for everybody, this is a perfect example. As I said, I didn't prime Sean on this at all, but it's a perfect example of that self-awareness. I said, Sean, I'd like to come on board and do mindset motivation. And the first question he asked literally threw me. I was expecting a yes or no. What would it entail? And he it was a great question, and I allowed it to resonate with me. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Somebody that I regard as very smart, really accomplished, has asked me a question that I did not expect or perceive coming. So where is my gap on that? And I had this conversation in one of our group calls about, I said, I'm constantly critiquing myself. And the person I was saying it to said, yeah, but you've got to do it with kindness. And I went, no, critique shouldn't be an emotional ego word. I'm not critiquing my intent. I'm not critiquing my spirit and my soul. I'm critiquing the actions I took. And if I accept that I'm a flawed human being, which I am, who makes 10,000 mistakes every day, why would I need to do it kindly? It's like saying I would do it redly. Right? It's the wrong adjective. Critique shouldn't be about ego or emotion. It should just be about going, hang on a second, why did that not happen the way I wanted it to? Oh yeah, okay, great. As long as your intent's good. So my two last questions, and then we'll wrap up. Kind of a quick fire answer if we can. One of the things we're trying to impress on people is there is obviously human tragedy right now. There will be people that hear this that have gone through things that, and I will say this, thank God I can't even imagine. And my heart goes out to them, as I think my heart, and I think everybody would agree with this, goes out to the first line responders who are just putting themselves in harm's way for us, for our families, our communities, and thank you all so much for what you're doing. But if we compartmentalize that, as hard as that might be for a second, what opportunities do you see for you and your family and your business in this very unique time.
Yeah, and I do echo that empathy. So just as a 15 seconds on this, every day I connect to this tragedy. Every day I ask Alexa in a number of different geographies, the world, America, and some sub-geographies, how many people, what's the status of Corona? I hear how many people have it, how many people passed away. And I do that because I don't watch the news, right? And I'll do a flash briefing on Alexa as well for like 2.5 minutes on what somebody would claim to be the news, which is not, of course, not the news, but it'll be an update on the virus, basically, and any other horrific thing happening in the world. So I'll at least check in for that on an empathetic level. And I think that, as you said, acknowledging these incredible folks, I think they're heroes. They are the heroes of this dynamic, and it's a war at this stage. It seems like we're winning the war. It seems like there's very positive turns happening. But I do connect to the fact that people are dying. And I have every conversation I have now, I'm in New Jersey, we're right near the epicenter of this entire thing. If not part of the epicenter, I guess we are. And so it's incredibly omnipresent in the thinking and the feeling, the emotions. So I do connect with that. So, and I pray and I feel, and at times I've shed a tear about it. So that is completely in place for me. And at the same time, I made a mindset choice a long time ago to appropriately have the experiences of sadness. And by the way, I also think on a daily basis that for every person that has Corona, there's more than one person who is living in sexual slavery. I also think that there are way more people who are physically blind. I think of people that are committing suicide, that are dying from malaria, that are enduring any number of other epic and disgusting and horrible hardships, right? So for us, though, to function, the question becomes, how does it serve those people to carry that with me beyond several important, deep moments of thought and prayer in my heart? And my answer is, I don't think so, except to the extent that I'm, charitably raising money for or something like that. So I spend what I perceive to be my mindset intention decision. I invite everybody to make an intentional mindset decision about it, to spend a certain limited period of time connecting to those dynamics with empathy and humanity and love, and making decisions about your charity and contribution actions around those. Once we're complete with that portion of our life and day, or multiple portions of our life and day, I then see extraordinary opportunity, because I believe that my mission is to impact as many people as I can and use my talents in a positive way to truly make the world a greater place. And so opportunities I see is, I don't think it's ever been easier to access people. Number one, I don't think it's ever been easier ever to access people and build a relationship. And everything comes from influencing people. Well, first, everything comes from mindset. After we have mindset and motivation, then it comes from our ability to influence. Once we are present to the reality that people want to connect, and Peter, I could tell you 25 stories right now of the insane amount of people we at Callagy Law and Blinded, yourself, are connecting with, including this that's happening right now. This would not be happening but for what's occurring, I believe. And thank you for that. So I think that it's to be present to the reality that people are 100 times to 1,000 times, in my opinion, more accessible and desirous of connecting with you than ever before. And if people are intentional with integrity about accelerating who they are and where they are in the world, to use that for good, right, as the footnote 3 or 4, we're never going to see this opportunity again in our lifetime. I truly believe that. And the time is right here, right now, for the people who understand that. And I'm living every day with, and Mona's sitting here beside me, and, perhaps at times to her own, another, call, and she's been so supportive and incredible, but I am behaving with immense intentionality in my mindset and using it as fire motivation, that there is a I pray this ends immediately. It's not going to end immediately, but it will end, and we will all come to the other side of this. And my intention is, when I'm on the other side of this, I'm going to be in a place to have 1,000 times the impact I was before we went into it. And then I'm going to be encouraging, influencing, leading as many people as I possibly can for them to come out on the other side of this with 1,000 times the impact of where they went in to this. And that is what I believe is the opportunity. By sharing, adding value, connecting, speaking, again, never will we see this opportunity where the world opens their heart, where everybody slows down, right? And there's such a void that is being filled by people like yourself, other remarkable people, hopefully people like myself, all the people listening, to create massive acceleration and adding value to the world and expanding their opportunity to create influence. So that is what I believe is present.
And let's bring that back to our earlier example. We said Bruce Springsteen plays in a bar, 100 people check in, 90 don't care, 10 love it, 10 love it becomes 24, 24 becomes 60. What we're talking about right now for everybody listening, and just to put those two things together, is 10 right now can become 240, and 240 can become 12,000. Right? The exponentiality of the situation that was already true and present is in itself being treated to exponentiality.
Yes.
So it's just crazy if you have a mission and a vision, and as you said, absolutely with integrity and authenticity, get on a camera, get on a stage, join Hack Mankind, join Unblinded, join Relentless Guard. There's so many, and I'm going to say that in full because it deserves the credit it has. One of both of our dear friends, Michael Smiken, who's on here, setting up Relentless Guardians, which is another lens on the same journey. And whichever one of those is where you fit in and sit, fantastic. Just get in on it. The second question that I'm trying to ask you, I'm very conscious of your time. I could talk to you forever. By the way, me and Sean might get like 12 minutes when we try and get on a call about once a week, because we've both got all these calls going on. So literally, I'm like, right, if I get him on camera, he can't go anywhere. So I can ask everything I want. So my next question is, we have fish in canals in Venice. We have dolphins in ports. We are taking our homeless people off the streets. At 8 p.m. in the UK every day, the entire country stops for 2 minutes to celebrate the NHS and frontline responders, and just literally bang pans outside. And I know that similar efforts are going on everywhere else. What opportunity do you hope that mankind brings out of this? So when we all come out of our isolation, we come out of our bunkers and we go back into the world, what one single choice do you hope they make and go, you know what, the thing we used to do, that one thing, whether it's the homeless or wars or the way we painted our walls, whatever it is that you think, what one thing do you hope humanity goes, you know what, let's leave that in our past and not bring it into our present?
Blame and judgment. And footnote 5 for today, Michael Smiken, Relentless Guardian, dear friend, has lived in the formula, my partner, and I love him, and he is a true example of possibility. And there is like nobody like him. He is just extraordinary. So Michael, love you, brother. And Jessica as well. Hello, Jessica. And so I would say, yeah, blame and judgment. If we could distinguish between people's actions and themselves and have healthy boundaries, I think Adam Gagino coined this time, my co-founder of Unblinded, the first time in human history that we are all against something at the same time. One thing, for the first time in human history, united as a planet. It's not, a war, two sides. There's not two sides. There's like this virus, staying healthy and surviving. And it has opened a portal that some of the other portals have been opened. World War II, post-World War II, in many spaces and places, was a period that was truly remarkable in many, many different positive ways. And my hope would be that gratitude rises to such a level that we begin to see the blame and judgment, finger pointing culture that has risen around the world to disappear. And in its place rises people to say no, like just no, to like fear and distortion. And as it arises, that it's the thing we see as after Corona as the common enemy. Like, don't blame and judge people. Think of boundaries and actions. Do with love and respect. Boundaries, strength, clarity. I agree, right? There's lines, there's delineation. I don't believe in, this endless communal environment where people can just take advantage and not work. Like, we can tell the truth to each other and have boundaries, but to watch this like venom that has arisen in how we communicate with other human beings to go away. And I'll just drop this. Donald Trump's communication is definitely, in my mind, suboptimal, but it is identically suboptimal to the people who don't like Donald Trump and how they talk about Donald Trump. So let this end. Let this end, and let's not accept that type of communication as human beings and not justify it by what we said in, like, when we were 5 years old in the playground. Well, they did it first. And if we could break the pattern of justifying our own blame and judgment, fear and distortion like behavior with the justification of they did it first, that, Peter, is what I hope we leave behind.
I could not agree more. And it's funny you mentioned Mr. Trump, because we had the same thing in Brexit. Was exactly the same. The vitriol that came out and the venom that came out from people that voted Remain to the people that voted Leave. It's like, you're embodying everything that you said that they are.
Yeah.
And the polarization in the world that is, I think we're mirroring the same thing. Yeah. Trump and Brexit are symptoms of that, the way that we have been communicating with each other, the respect we've had for each other, gives spaces for these polarizing forces to then exist. Yeah. And somehow coming back to a place of going, you're different to me. And we said this the other day, I don't know the exact number, but we share 99.98% of our DNA, and yet we choose to celebrate the 0.02% that we differ on. It's crazy. Whether it's black, white, Chinese, French, male, female, we are so connected. We need to focus in on those points and take those points forward, not the differences, while celebrating the gloriousness of differences. And I know you've got to get on to another call. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. From my side, anybody that's watching this, please join us on www.hackmankind.com. Sign up, free for the first 1,000 people, free for life for any first-time responders, just to celebrate and honor from my perspective. And Sean, where can people find out more about you and Unblinded?
Yeah, the place to be, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time every morning, unblindedhuddle.com. Yeah, that's the place, unblindedhuddle.com. And we are meeting the world there and going from there.
I couldn't recommend it more from my side. It's something that is a fixture in my diary.
Thank you, brother. And looking forward to having you on the huddle yourself. And let's get that done and join the Real Raw. And I am super grateful to everybody who's listening. Have a safe and blessed day. And for those observing, happy Good Friday and Easter. And have a beautiful day.
And final thought from me, tell your son college is the only time you can get away with anything you want to get away with the whole of your life.
Thank you, Peter.
See you soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.